Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another session, tonight's financial webinar. With us, we have Rhiannon. She is from Suncoast Credit Union, and she is a youth outreach specialist and a certified financial educator. And Jose Guevara, he is a youth outreach specialist as well. So with that, I'm going to have you all take it away. Welcome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having us. And thank you all who are on right now. I want you to know that we're going to be using the chat a lot. So be sure to have that open. We'll be asking different questions. We really want to make sure that we're answering the things that you're interested in. I'm Rhiannon Ray. I work at Suncoast Credit Union in our youth outreach team. I feel like I have the coolest job ever. We get to teach financial literacy, which I know that so many of us wish that maybe we had gotten it while we were younger. So our team covers the whole gamut from kindergarten all the way through learners of all ages into adulthood. And then I'm joined with Jose. He's also a certified financial education instructor. So he'll be monitoring the chat. He'll also be sharing some of his stories and some of his experiences. So we're super excited to have you all on today, and we will get started with our presentation, which is called 10 Steps to Financial Success. So in the chat right now, if you can just take a moment and maybe put one thing that you'd like to get out of this presentation, and then I'll have Jose read through those, but I'll start getting going on our next slide while you guys type that out. So financial success is ultimately about being in control of your money. So we all know that in life, we're going to have different amounts of money. So, some of us may have more, some of us may have less, but it's not about how much you have, it's about how you control it. And that's really what the focus is for our time together today. Our income doesn't determine how successful you are. Your choices and your priorities do. And that's really what we want you all to get away with, is at the end of this, doing more of the stuff that you love and managing your money in a way that aligns with your own personal goals. So Jose, do we have anything in the chat so far?
We do. We have Kelly who said debt management.
Awesome. So that's going to be covered.
Yep. My goals is to teach my son financial literacy and open up an account. We had someone say financial success and literacy, and then one other one that said investment diversifying.
Awesome. So yeah, all of the stuff is going to be covered. It's almost like you were all planted in the audience because that is exactly the 10 steps. So getting started on step 1 is establishing goals. So in order to get to where you want to go, you need to know where you want to go. We don't typically plug in or just get started driving. We normally know our destination. So think about your goals. And I would love if you guys would share some of your goals in the chat. Don't be embarrassed. I really don't believe in any goal that's too big or too small. You just want to make sure that it's personal and something that you truly care for. So while you guys start to share your goals, I'll continue to go through this. To achieve your financial goals, prioritization is essential. So you want to make sure that you identify your needs versus your wants, because at the end of the day, in order to achieve our long-term goals, in order to achieve the things that we really want in life, it does involve a level of daily sacrifice, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. So we'll talk a little bit more about those sacrifices in the coming slides. But when you're making your goal, you want to make sure that it is specific. So a lot of times when New Year rolls around, how many of us have a goal that is to get fit? So me, for one, I always say that every year. My goal is to get fit. There's a problem with that goal. The goal is not really specific, because if I were to ask everybody to say in the chat what getting fit means, we would all have different answers, right? So some of us might be like, oh, getting fit is working out 5 times a week, when to me, I don't go to the gym at all. So getting fit, I would feel is like, okay, maybe exercising once a week, eating differently. The point of this is that you want to make sure that you're specific when you're setting your goal. So as you're thinking through these things that you want to achieve, be as specific as you want. Like if your goal is to have a boat, what type of boat is it? Like if your goal is to go on a trip, where are you going? Because the more that you can start to visualize your goal, the more tangible it becomes to create the steps to reach it. Then once you know your goal, you want to know when your goal is to achieve that. So if your goal is to go on a vacation, when do you want to go on a vacation? Is it when your student graduates? Is it when the school year's up? What is the timeline for that goal? And then figuring out how much you need to save each month to achieve that goal is how you really start to break it down into smaller steps. It's important to be realistic while making your goals, mainly just because you want to keep momentum, right? So if my goal is to own a rocket ship, while we do see that some people on Earth do achieve that goal, that's not exactly realistic for my situation right now. So making sure that I am realistic in my goal setting. And so your proposed amount should be like a comfortable figure for you. So Jose, do we have any goals in the chat?
We have a lot of goals. We have things like buying a bigger house, helping with the kids' college expenses, and setting up retirement funds, or even like a large goal where they want to be financially set to where they allow their children to be financially set as well and savvy for when they're at an older age as well, so that they can navigate through all these obstacles as adults, or even paying down credit cards or just paying off a car within a certain amount of time. So very amazing goals.
Yeah, all of these goals are so great. And what's great is that it sounds like there's a lot of emotion and meaning behind these goals. And even when it comes to our debt paying off goals, we want to think about the why behind that. Like, what is it? Because we want to have more disposable income where which means you can just spend money on other things that you want to do. Is it in order to set up our families for the future? So just keeping the end in mind does help create these goals. So now, again, just to work you through this, that you know your goal, start to research, start to dream. I tell couples to do this, or if you're single, you can do this too, but like go to a coffee shop or go out together and have a dream meeting is what I call it. And it's where you just make these plans, make these dreams, and then put a figure with it. And now you're making your plan for how much you're going to save each month to achieve that figure. So once you do that, it becomes a lot easier to be accountable to yourself for your dream, and be accountable to the others that you care about for your dream. And then if you are planning alone, be sure to just loop in somebody that a friend or a family member, to just tell them what that is, so that they can help hold you accountable as well.
We had an amazing or really awesome goal right here, purchasing an investment property within the next year so that they can rent out. So that's definitely
awesome.
a long-term goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then also just knowing, in addition, what can be done with your current resources, or if there might be like a temporary sacrifice that you have to do in order to gain your income. So maybe if your goal is a rental property, and you want to just bump up your income a little bit, maybe that's just getting a part-time job through the holidays to help with that down payment on the rental property. Or that's just an example. But that can apply to anybody's goal. If your goal is a trip, maybe it is just picking up a second job to kind of boost your income just a little bit until you can do that. Awesome. So now step 2, I feel like this is emotionally one of the harder steps to do, but it's very important. And it is taking stock of what you have and what you owe. So you want to be aware of your financial starting point. And this can be kind of hard, especially when you start looking into net worth. Net worth is pretty much a calculation of what you own versus what you owe. So your assets, which are like a home, or, you know, if you have your vehicle paid in full, those are assets. But then what you owe is like, okay, well, if you still have a car payment, that would be subtracted. And then that equals your net worth. Don't be discouraged. A lot of people, when you start off your journey, have a negative net worth. And that's a part of paying off debt. That's a part of beginning your financial journey, but you need to know your starting place so that you can start to calculate those things. I saw some stuff in the chat about generational wealth and about having your family set up for the future. And that definitely goes into having more assets than liabilities, which we're going to talk about more in depth later on. But again, knowing where you're starting from really helps you navigate where you're going, and also celebrate your successes, because if you are making an extra payment on debt, that's a success. Even if it's not a huge number to you, that's still one step in the right direction, is better than not taking any action at all. So definitely feel encouraged in that. Then step 3, also hard, but this is creating a spending and savings plan, which is also known as a budget. Budgets kind of get a bad rap because, you know, we always hear phrases like, oh, you know, I'm on a budget, and oh, like meaning kind of tight with money, but that's not the case at all. Budgets are for people of all income levels. Budgets are for businesses of all sizes. Whether it is a startup business or a billion-dollar company, they're operating on a budget. I can promise you that, if they're successful. Same thing with individuals. Like, budget is really just telling your money where to go so that you don't blink and wonder where it went. So who has ever developed a budget? You can just say yes in the chat if you've done that.
Yes, we're getting a lot of yeses.
Awesome.
I have one no.
Awesome. Now, does anybody like to do it? Is my next question.
I don't think anyone likes to do it. I do it, but I don't like to do it.
Okay, yeah. So I see no's coming in, and I'm not sure if it's no's for liking it or no's for doing it. But either way, we're going to talk a little bit about it. So yes, making this plan can kind of be a bummer sometimes, because it also forces you to look at your income and look at where it's going and being strategic in that. Typically, a lot of people do have that negative association with budgets, but I want to assure you that it is a tool that can really help you get to those goals that we were just dreaming of on the previous slide. So we want to start with analyzing our income, thinking through all the ways that you earn money. This is the first step to creating a budget. So whether you have a full-time job, you have a side hustle, you have a part-time job, you want to put first on your budget all of your income. And you want to make sure that you're making your budget based on your after-tax income, which is your net income. So I tell high schoolers this story. So hopefully if any of you guys have kids who are approaching like their first job, they don't go through what I went through. But I did a very simple math equation when I had my first job. And what it was how many hours I worked and how much I got paid an hour equals my check, right? That's what I thought it should be. So I made a plan, like, I'm going to do this with my friends. I'm going to do that. I'm going to borrow my parents' car and fill up the tank with gas and go to the beach. Like, I had all of these plans. And then when I got my check and it was several $100s shorter than what I calculated, I had called my parents. And I was like, I think this job's scamming me because they didn't pay me for all my work. Yeah, I didn't realize that your money gets taxed, and that seems very silly now, but I'm sure I'm not alone in that story. So yeah, so just making sure that when you make your budget, you don't do what I did, that you're making it based off of what's actually deposited into your account or what your check actually ends up being when it's in your hand. Then you want to analyze your expenses. So in order to have accurate figures, you want to track your spending for at least a month. So this is where I encourage you. One second, I'm going to switch over from my headset.
Can you hear me, Jose? Awesome. Cool. Sorry, my headset was dying, everybody. But when you start to analyze your expenses, one thing that's really important is to track your spending. So if you currently have a checking account at a financial institution, that's the best way to look back at a log of here's what I've spent money on. So most banks, credit unions, wherever you're at, likely has an app or an online service where you can look at your statement for all the money that's come out. This is a little bit of homework for you, but put that into categories. Sometimes there are apps, like I know that our app has Sun Money that's integrated where it can kind of categorize your spending for you, but sometimes just printing it out, old-fashioned highlighter categories is really helpful too, because you want to know how much. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but your new mic is actually giving a lot of feedback back. Making some weird noise.
Okay, let me see. Jose, do you mind hopping on talking about how you can track your expenses and what that could end up revealing while
Sure.
I get up?
All right. So, tracking your expenses, making sure that we know where our money is going and how it's being used. It's very helpful for us, whether you're in high school, whether you're younger. I personally deal with a younger demographic in my home job, and just knowing how they're going to manage your money, just like Brandon mentioned earlier, as they're planning things to do, makes them accountable for the long run. Makes it easier for them to be able to know where their funds are going to, if they're going to Starbucks every single time, or how they're spending their money, and use their funds a lot more wisely as you're going through life in general. But knowing where your funds go is extremely helpful, no matter how old you are. Making sure you have a savings account, have savings available for the unexpected, making sure that you know your debts amount so that you are prepared to make future budgets to help you out to pay for those debts as well, or how to manage them properly, whether it's by balance transferring funds to lower rate credit card or things that will help you in the long run, and just overall knowing your bottom line, the bottom line of knowing where you want to be and where you are, and just getting to that point so that you can be successful in the long run. It's actually worse.
You said an example of what happens when we had in people who looked at how much money was spent on a certain coffee brand.
That's actually a lot worse. Do you happen to have your wired headset?
I might. Okay, if you could just hop on with the rest of it really quick, I will go grab that.
You're sounding good now.
You're sounding better now.
Okay, then let's just try it with this. It's good.
It's just a little loud, yeah, but it's clear.
Okay. Alrighty. So yeah, we actually had a coworker who tracked their spending for a year on Starbucks, and it was $500 that they had spent in the year on Starbucks. And they were definitely shocked by that, because they would have rather spent $500 on anything else. But those things get revealed a lot. Like even me, I did it for a month, and 1 month I spent $60 on just coffee and a banana, and from a gas station. I didn't even realize that. So you want to make sure that you are aware of where your money's going. So Does anybody have like kind of a budget busting category for them? You can put that in the chat.
Streaming platforms. Someone asked, what is a budget buster?
Great. So that's the kind of an item that just makes your whole budget go out the window. So maybe you really like fast food. Maybe, you know, somebody did use an example of streaming services, Chick-fil-A. And Jose, while they do that, I'm going to go run and try to get my wired headset.
No problem. Yeah, so budget busters are things that, you know, can definitely bust the budget. Something that wasn't planned. I know just from experience, Chick-fil-A was taking my money for the longest time. So was Starbucks, or even that Cuban coffee that I would get down from the Cuban store right down the street from me from work. I would go every single day. And I'm like, I sat down one day and actually added up all the times that I went every single time and figured out that I was spending way too much money on coffee every day. When you're thinking about it, you're like, oh, it's only $2 or $3 every single time that I go in there, but it definitely adds up in the long run. So just trying to get past the budget busters will definitely help you meet your end goal and making sure that you're having enough funds in your savings account for the unexpected, or just being able to get ahead or meeting those goals that you guys want. As you guys mentioned, either paying off your cars or paying off your house quicker as you retire. It might not seem like a lot, but I know when one of our coworkers was going to Starbucks and she was spending over $500, $600 every single year just on coffee, she realized that she can use those funds on another manner. And as she liked to vacation, she would now use those funds to go on a vacation. So when she got back, she had less debt. She had more money to pay things off a lot quicker, so that she was less stressed as she was coming back and didn't have to deal with a credit card debt or have to deal with a loan that she had to get out just to go on vacation. So it definitely helps out thinking ahead and steering away from those budget busters. But yeah, seems like Rhiannon's back.
Yeah, is this better?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, just being aware of those budget busters actually really ends up helping you get them under control. And we'll talk about how on the next slide. So first, you know, you'll write your income, then you'll write your expenses. So that's all of your bills. That's all the things that you have to get to survive. I actually label my own budget in order of like highest priority things that I must have to survive, to things that are like, I really would like to keep this, to things that I don't need. So like the top ones are, I need to pay my mortgage each month, or you need to pay your rent each month, your car payment, anything like that. Then it goes into, okay, my groceries are super important. I need to have those. So that's up there. And then it gets to things that I'd like to have, like my streaming services, my nice phone type of thing. So those are next. And you also want to have your savings. So you want to make sure that you're paying yourself honestly first before all of this. And that is a recommended 10% of your income. And your debt. So we do have some things that we owe, right? We have our car payments. We have maybe if we took out an installment plan for our cell phones, or student loan payments, all of those would also go in your budget. And then you would subtract all of those from your income. So there's 1,000 ways to create a budget. Totally up to you what you prefer. I know Jose uses a really robust, awesome Excel spreadsheet that can kind of just stay for month to month. I use like a note on my phone for it. You know, you can have pen and paper. It's totally up to you. And then once you subtract all of that, that shows what's remaining. And then it's best to make sure that your budget, every dollar is allotted for, you know, so that you avoid overspending. So if you notice that there's a little bit left over, maybe you put a little extra on debt or a little more in savings. Awesome.
I'd definitely like to say that there's no wrong way of how do you track your expenses or your budget, just as long as it works for you. Just because I personally have a very robust Excel sheet that literally tracks my expenses for the whole year, doesn't mean it works for Rhiannon. She likes to see more of the month-to-month things or as she's getting her funds. I spend it way ahead of time and know where everything's going out throughout the year. So there's no wrong way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so step 4 is making sure that we're living within our means. So considering just once you look at these numbers, once you know maybe, once you've known your goal, once you know how much you're spending each month and where you'd like to be, you want to make sure that you're committing to yourself by making sacrifices when needed. So living within your means is pretty much not subscribing to the whole keeping up with the Joneses or keeping up with the Kardashians, now I guess it is, mentality, and being content with what you have at the time. So sometimes you might realize like, hey, some of the stuff I can't let go of. Like maybe you look at your numbers and after all of your bills, there isn't anything remaining, or maybe it's negative. So you found yourself kind of in a cycle of needing relief from it, and figuring out a way to either reduce the existing bills or increasing your income through maybe a temporary additional job. And then prioritizing your spending. So this is one of the categories that we can all be impacted in. And it is reducing our spending in areas that isn't important, substituting expensive items for less expensive ones, postponing certain goals or expenses until they become affordable, foregoing some expenses altogether. And so I'll use an example because I think I saw subscriptions come a few times in the chat, right? That was a few. Okay, so an example for each of these, so you know, is an example of reducing it would be either calling and seeing if they could give you a discount on your subscriptions, or maybe being like, hey, I really love Disney Plus, but I can let go of Netflix for now. So getting rid of one of them or getting rid of two of them. Another thing is substituting, like maybe instead of these streaming services, you start going to Redbox and renting a DVD or something, or watching less TV. Postponing is like, okay, I really want this, but I'm going to put my memberships on pause for a few months just so that I can put more on debt. And then foregoing would be like, actually, my goal is to just not watch TV anymore. So let's just get rid of all of them. Another way is coffee. If you find yourself also wanting to go to a lot of fast food coffee or just like quick coffee, reducing it would be, okay, I go 5 times a week. Now let's just go once or twice a week. Substituting would be, hey, I'm going to actually get a machine at home where I can make my fancy drinks. Postponing is, all right, I'm going to buckle down this quarter. I'm going to buckle down this month, not get any coffee this month, but I will next month. And then foregoing is, maybe I should just cut back on caffeine altogether and not get any coffee. So I want you guys to think about areas that you can start doing that to create more income. Because ultimately, when you decrease your spending or when you decrease your debt, you're giving yourself a raise because you have more money to use for things that you want to use it for. So here are our suggested budget guidelines. Heavy on suggested because everyone's life and situation is different. But we recommend that you always save 10%. So that's paying yourself first. There's ways to make that super easy by like having direct deposit, going 10% to a different account, to your savings account, so that you don't have to be the one to actually press the button. Or you could just always move it over. And then housing is 35% of your income. Transportation is 15%, debt is 15%, and other is 25%. And then the great thing about the debt category is that as you pay off debt, that frees up more money for other. So those dreams that we're talking about, those goals that we're talking about, you'll have more money to put towards that when less money is going toward monthly debts. Awesome. And let's just do a quick chat. Is everybody doing good? You can just put I'm good in the chat.
Yep, everyone seems to be doing good. And I know one example that about streaming that you were mentioning, Rhiannon. One thing that I started doing is getting some of those streaming accounts that have multiple channels. So like the Discovery Plus that has like 5-6 different channels within it, so you get more for your money.
Okay.
So you're not double paying.
I love that. And also, I forgot to mention, we will have time for Q&A at the end. So if anybody has any questions, or please be sure to type them out and hold on to them somewhere. And then when we do Q&A, Jose will review the chat for those questions. Awesome. So now, speaking of paying yourself first, that is what we kind of already talked about, but just want to reiterate it. Saving is the vehicle that helps you get to achieving your goal. So saving is also a really hard discipline to start to do. So I know somebody mentioned with their kids being able to teach them financial literacy. That is one of the best ways to start teaching your kids, is getting them in the habit of saving early and often. So whenever you give them their allowance, or whenever they get birthday or Christmas money, or mow the lawn and get money from a neighbor, encourage them to put 10% into a savings account. And even kids can have savings accounts. So you want to have them understand the equation. Pretty much what we tell them is, okay, well, if you have $10, you need to save $1. If you have $20, you need to save $2. Because once they start doing that, their brain is going to have the muscle memory to keep on doing that throughout adulthood. And then for us, who maybe we didn't learn that when we were younger, I know I didn't start saving until pretty far after my first job. So being sure that we're doing that too, that we're saving 10% of our income. And that can be for an emergency, for a rainy day, but also just because there are goals that we want to achieve. And weighing instant gratification against ultimate gratification. So our streaming services, our fast food, our coffee is great today, but how much greater would it be if we're able to get that designer bag that we always wanted, or if we're able to have money to give to our kids when they're in college and need a little extra help or spending money. That will feel a lot greater than the instant. All right, so for savings, there are 3 tiers to it. So the first is to establish a liquid savings account to be used for emergencies. So this is an account where you can access the money pretty quickly. Your emergency savings, it's recommended 3 to 6 months. Of course, we're in a pandemic right now, and depending on your industry, you might want to adjust that because, you know, it can vary from job to job, but pretty much figuring out a figure that is most comfortable for you and for your household. And so this money should be easily accessed in an account where you don't get penalties or with penalties for withdrawing it. The next tier is medium-term goals that you want in 2 to 5 years, and this should be in a semi-liquid account, like a certificate of deposit. And then a long-term savings goal is like your retirement account or your kids' education account. And there are financial advisors or professionals who can help you navigate all of these things as well. And a lot of awesome free financial education online. I know like Suncoast website has a lot of education and a lot of different products like money market accounts and certificate of deposits that can help you reach these goals.
Did have a question for you here, Rhiannon.
Yes.
Natalie asked, where's the best place to save? Savings account or 401k, etc.?
Okay, so that really, again, depends on your goals. So a liquid account, like a money market or your normal savings account, those are accounts where you can access that cash quick. And they earn, like money markets earn a little bit more. So when you're keeping your money there, it's actually growing. So each of these account options do have a growth option, but they're different depending on the amount of time that it's in there and depending on the rate at the moment. So a money market or another sort of liquid account where you can access the money without getting penalized is good for your emergency fund or your like smaller savings. Then a semi-liquid account, 2 to 5 years, is a certificate of deposit. So you'll be earning more money while you're keeping your money there, but there also are early withdrawal penalties oftentimes. So you have to make sure that the money is staying steady there. So you want to make sure that you don't have money there that you might actually end up needing super fast, because then it ends up being almost pointless if you have to withdraw it earlier. But it can be a really awesome tool to grow that money. And then for those big things, like maybe you have an elementary schooler that you're starting to save up for their college fund, or your retirement, like a 401k, those are important, but those are going to be long-term investment accounts, like an IRA or a 401k or 403b. So it really depends. The answer is all of them are great places to save your money, but it depends on your goal.
And then we do have another one here. It says, right now I have to choose between paying debt and saving, but with interest rates, I have to pay for my debt. Is it worth it to save?
So yes. So in the financial education world, we want to make sure that you're set first with your savings, so that you don't have to continue the cycle of debt. So for example, if I was, let's say I'm heavily paying off debt, right? Every cent that I make is going on my debt, but then my tire pops and I don't have any money in my savings, I would probably have to put it on a credit card, right? Which is adding more debt, which thus continues the cycle. So what I typically recommend is for households or families to look at what their past 2 years looked like in terms of emergencies that have happened. So when I looked at my life, I was like, okay, our AC is probably on the fritz of needing to be replaced, but I've had to do repairs for the past 2 years on it that cost like $500 each time. My car always has something wrong with it, it seems. So once I figured out this amount of how much would have made me feel, like how much would make me feel comfortable having this in my account, I saved that as kind of a first step to get me out of a jam while I pay down my debt. So first I saved that, then paid down my debt, because what happens again is if my AC breaks, now I have my own savings that I'm dipping into instead of having to put it on a card and pay additional interest. And then I replenish that amount and go back to paying off my debt. So it's important to have savings, I would say, just so that you don't feel like you're not making any progress with debt repayment. And I hope that answered the question.
Or even get into the trouble of going and getting a payday loan and being in that higher cycle of interest. So it gets you out of that whole cycle of extra debts.
Yeah. So again, like I totally get where you're coming from with interest rates. Like it is important to get, it is important to be paying on your debt. It is important to try to always pay more than the minimum, so that you are actually making progress in the debt payment and seeing your principal going down. But it also is important in covering your home, covering your family, to have just a little bit. Now, 3 to 6 months can sound like a huge number. And I totally agree with you there. So that's not feasible for everyone. But figuring out what's feasible for you right now and what would actually be super helpful for you, saving that and then going back to your debt. But maintaining the minimums while you're saving, because you don't want to go into any deferment situations or anything with that. So awesome. All right, so just the moral of the saving side is to not procrastinate. You want to make sure that you are just doing it now, because ultimately time is on your side if you start sooner than later. So this chart shows a little bit of what happens. Like, for example, if you were to start saving in a high earning account right now, you would end up having significantly more than if you wait 10 years. So this is based on saving $150 a month with a 6% annual return. All right, so now it seems like there was a lot of debt questions, so I want to make sure that we have ample time to marinate on this section. Step 6 is deleting your debt. So a lot of people require or rely on credit to make ends meet. And if you do, try to start living a debit or a cash-only lifestyle. So for anyone who's unfamiliar, debit cards are your money. So that's connected with your checking account. It's your money. And then credit cards are borrowed money from either the bank or the credit union or whatever financial institution that needs to be paid back with interest. So it's impossible to get out of debt if you continue to charge your card. So being able to reduce that is super important. Interest and finance fees make debt super expensive. You can call your creditors and ask them to reduce them. I mean, the worst thing they can say is no. They're not going to increase it based on the call. So that's something, a tip to kind of try to help a little bit. Because if you're only paying the minimum, it drags the debt out. That's the way interest is designed, unfortunately. Because when you're paying the minimum, interest continues to be applied. I remember I paid off a card and I ended up getting my statement in the mail. It's like, if you wouldn't have paid this off, it would have taken me 15 years to pay off a card. And the balance was like $1,000. So just making sure that you're very attuned to what your interest rates are and that you're trying your hardest to pay above the minimum.
Someone asked if they can, if you can go back to the savings chart for 5 seconds.
So this is explaining like the concept of compound interest. So just to explain what that means, the numbers that I'm about to use are not correct at all. Like, so this is my disclaimer. But imagine that you have an account that you put $10 into. Then you end up earning $1 from the financial institution for keeping your $10 there. So now you have $11. Well, compound interest gives you a percentage of that $11 now. So now you have 12, and so on and so forth until it keeps growing. So that's what this chart is showing, is that if you start now, then within 15 years, you would have a lot more than if you waited 10 years from now. These figures are purely fictional, and I know times have changed a little bit. This just shows you the power of starting now and utilizing that compound interest.
And Rhiannon, I actually have a great example of that, reducing the interest rate on, for example, credit cards. Mm-hmm. I actually went through that myself when I was paying off my debts. I actually called Discover and was like, hey, I've been a long time customer with you guys and I'm trying to pay off debts. Is there anything that you guys can help me with? Which they actually did lower my interest rates by 2%. And they ended up giving me an extra 10% off every time I made the minimum payment for for 12 months. So they were able to help me out in that way. So it never hurts to ask. The worst they can say, like you said, was, no, we can't help you with that. But the best case scenario is you end up getting some extra help or even some extra money put back into your card.
Yeah, that's definitely good. And this webinar is being recorded. So yes. Awesome. Okay, so then you want to pay your debt, and there's a few different methods for this. So there's one called the debt snowball, and that's where you pay off your smallest debt to your largest debt, but you keep paying the minimum each time. So let's just say I have a $50 doctor's office bill that I have to pay $10 a month on, and then I have my furniture bill, and that's $500 a month, and I have to pay $500 total, and I have to pay $30 a month. And then you have your car, and let's say you owe $1,000 left on your car, and you have to pay $250 a month. So first you would pay, in the debt snowball, first you would pay off that smallest bill, and then you would use that extra money to pair it with the next bill, so that you're paying more off than the minimum. So that's like paying your smallest ones to your largest. And then there's the debt avalanche, which is based on interest rate. So you look at your highest interest first, and you pay that off first. The debt snowball is good psychologically because you're experiencing little wins each time, which can kind of help you feel good about it, especially if your biggest or highest interest debt is a very big number. But the avalanche mathematically helps you save a lot more money if you're paying off the highest interest rate first. So I'm going to jump past this one for now, but we'll loop back to any questions. I just want to make sure we cover the majority of the content first. So there are two different types of debts. There are asset debt and liability debt. So asset debt is something that is increased in value. So for example, if you have a mortgage, that's debt, but eventually when you own the house, that's an asset that you can pass on. That's something that you can always keep. Your business, your education, those are things that are assets. Liabilities are things that decrease in value. So for example, if you put going to the movies on a credit card, sure, you have the experience of the movie, but you're not that's not an asset that you're gaining. So it's a liability. Same thing with clothes, meals, vacations. The abuse of credit is one of the leading causes of financial failure. So just making sure that looking at your debt and seeing how much of this is going to turn into an asset and how much of this was a liability. Step 7 is buying a home. So I know right now it's kind of crazy out there in terms of buying a home, but ultimately that does help you build equity, which is more money on top of what you had originally paid for something. So for example, if you got a house for $100,000 and then 20 years later or 10 years later, it's worth $200,000, then you have $100,000 worth of equity in the house. It also helps you get some tax breaks. And then some ways that you can start to do this, or that you can start to work towards homeownership, is saving for a down payment and building your credit score, which through reducing your debt, that does help build your credit score when they see that you have more credit available. Sometimes homeownership isn't right for everyone. That might not be a part of your goals. So only do it if you feel like you can afford it. Step 8 is diversifying your investment portfolio. So somebody had put that before. With each investment, there's risk. That's just the reality of investing. But weigh the potential for risk against the potential for return. So it's important to have a mix of a bunch of things. I've heard someone explain it before. Instead of having all of your chickens in one basket, all of your eggs in one basket, have all of your chickens on the same farm. So not putting all of your hope into this one thing, but putting it in a bunch of different places. So a mix of stocks, bonds, cash offers security and growth, because ultimately like reality is with the stock market, if you have all your money in that and something happens, it kind of makes you feel a little panicky. So stocks or shares of a stock represent ownership, interest in a company. So you buy shares with the assumption that they'll increase in value, and you'll sell them for a higher price. There's always a risk that they decrease in value too. So that's the other thing that you want to always make sure that when you're investing, it's something that you're comfortable with and that you're working with a professional. I will say that we can't answer much on these topics because we're not financial advisors. So we're not legally qualified to give you any advice in this realm, but we're just purely educational. Bonds. A bond is a loan to a company or a government, and you buy it for a promised rate of return. And then cash equivalents are low risk investments like certificate of deposit accounts, which is what I had talked about before, and treasury bills. Mutual funds are a good way to instantly diversify. And these companies purchase a mix of stocks, bonds, and cash equivalents, and then sell their shares to the public. Step 9 is planning ahead with your insurance. So there are a bunch of different types of insurance, from your health insurance, your disability insurance, life insurance, your liability insurance, and auto insurance, renter's insurance, homeowner's insurance. So all of these protect different areas of your life, from your physical body yourself to your belongings. And it's really important to have these things. So in the event of something happening, you're taken care of and your valuables are taken care of. Part 2 of this is your estate planning. So having a formal plan drawn up for when you pass away. It sounds very sad, but being able to pass on the sense of security to your family is crucial in estate planning. That is the main point of estate planning. So determining the person who will administer the estate and distribute the assets, deciding the distribution, which is who gets what, and alternate beneficiaries if your first one is no longer living, and then choosing a guardian for your minor children, because if you don't decide, the state will decide for you. And then including a residuary clause, which just covers all the leftover things that you didn't explicitly mention. So when you form a trust, you transfer your assets to another person. The trustee then manages and controls those things. And then same thing as your documents for life-saving measures. So if you have a plan of what happens if you can't make a decision. So these are not fun to do, but it's really, really important, because in a past life, I worked in a law firm that dealt with a lot of these instances, and it's not fun for the family to have to be in the position where they're making these decisions, or where the children are making these decisions because their parents didn't leave a plan. And step 10 is getting help, using a professional, taking advantage of online internet stuff. So of course we know not everything you read on the internet can be trusted, but there are plenty of reputable sources for internet education, seminars, books, magazines. And then, you have your financial institution, or if you don't, Suncoast would love to have you. So having a place with professionals that you can trust, having places for people that you can ask these questions to. There's Suncoast Trust and Investments as well, who are financial planners, estate planners. So just making sure that you continue your education. And investment and knowledge always pays the best interest. So thank you for having us. It looks like we have about 5 minutes now for Q&A. So Jose.
We did have a question. It said, how about using credit cards that give you rewards but keeping the balance less than 30%. Usually have a card that they use for groceries.
Okay. So credit cards, and this is the way that I tell high schoolers, because a lot of them ask me, like, how do I know when I'm ready for a card? So the first thing that I encourage them to do is make sure that their savings is kind of beefed up, and also making sure that they make a plan for their checking. Of course, we know that credit cards do have a lot of perks and a lot of benefits, and credit is very needed. So the way that I recommend you to do that is to only charge amounts that you're able to pay off within the month. So maybe it is putting some groceries on there, but anticipate on paying off that full amount. So maybe you spend $400, maybe you spend $200 on groceries. Making sure that you have the money to pay that off by the end of the month, or before the end of the month, so that you don't get charged interest on that, because now your grocery trip that just costs a little bit more. And sure, you get rewards back, but it kind of like balances out. So the best way to really utilize rewards is still by paying off your balance. So what I do, for example, is I love to travel. So my husband and I save up money to go on a trip. We use our credit card while we're on the trip. But as soon as the wheels of the plane touch back in Tampa and everyone turns on their phone, I transfer all the money to pay off the credit card from my checking account to pay off my credit card, so that the balance is back at 0. I know once the utilization gets over 30%, I think that's why you mentioned it, is that your credit score starts kind of dipping sometimes, because they do look at available credit. But yeah, the best way to get around interest is by just paying off the balance in full each month. Any other questions? Great questions, though.
No other questions right now. I did a message in the chat, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to insert them in the chat for us. While we're waiting, I just wanted to let you guys know, if you guys are interested about knowledge and learning about different things, going to different seminars, as Brandon mentioned, knowledge is power. Suncoast does offer different seminars that are done by our trust and investments departments. They're usually found on our website under the webinar section, and they're completely free, that you guys can always go on there, and they're virtual. Most of the times they're virtual. During normal times they are in person, so that they have more of the face-to-face contact with you guys.
Yeah, and also here on the slide we have our balance financial education and counseling service. So if you go to suncoastcreditunion.balancepro.org, that takes you to some awesome resources as well, to kind of help you in your journey. But if there aren't, there is a question?
There's one last question.
Okay.
We might not be able to answer it only because we don't have that knowledge, but it says, when buying an additional house, what are factors that banks look at?
Okay. Yeah, I don't feel like I'm qualified to answer that, because we're not mortgage loan officers. But you can certainly go into your local branch, speak to one of the representatives there, or give a call to our main call center if you're looking at Suncoast specific. But I imagine that some of the factors of just debt, debt to income ratio, and those other factors for like when you got your initial property, I imagine that those will come into play as well for that process.
We don't have any additional questions.
Awesome. Well, again, we want to thank you so much for having us, and I will pass it over to Ms. Fullwood.
All right. Thanks once again for fabulous, fabulous information to help us all get back on track. Some information that we probably know to do, but have to get back into that practice. Thank you for making it so personable, giving great examples. You all always do such a great job. So thank you again so much. And with that, I want to tell everyone, thank you for joining us, and have a good night.